Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio, it's time for Family Business Radio. Showcasing outstanding family businesses and the advisors who assist them.
Good afternoon. Thank you for listening in to another episode of Family Business. I'm your host, Anthony Chen. Today we have two great guests to share with us their experiences as business owners and networking. So our first guest coming up is Terri Teague with Smallbiz.Consulting. Terri, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Pleasure. So kind of share us a little background story. What inspired Terri into becoming a business coach of today?
Well, let's see here. This is actually my fifth business. I started my very first one in my early 20s. And long about 2010, after the '08 bust, I had a lot of friends who also owned businesses that were tanking. And several asked me to help them not tank. So I put together a plan to get them kind of out of the hole and back up on solid ground. And it worked. And they went and told some other people who were also in trouble. And they rang me up. So I helped another batch of folks. And before I knew it, I was getting a lot of phone calls. So I accidentally became a business coach. And it's all built on just my experience of a ton of years and 4 other businesses, and just walking the talk, living the life, and getting over hurdles and knowing what it takes. So that's how I got here.
Mm-hmm. So having been experienced as a business owner on the other side,
yes,
what is kind of the biggest issues business owners face?
I think focus is the biggest issue, because as a business owner, small business owner, often means you don't really have the resources to parcel out things or delegate out everything. So you end up doing a lot of everything yourself. So when it comes to making necessary changes or taking growth steps or doing things that would grow your business, you don't have the bandwidth. So that's just a fact of life. So I'm going to say that the biggest issue that most business owners face is focus. You're in reaction mode 99% of the time, as opposed to forward-thinking mode.
Mm-hmm. So when you're looking with small businesses, what is it that you specifically look for? Is there an area of business that you like to focus on?
Well, there are several things that every single business must have in place in order to be successful. And 3 of those are your product, your people, and your processes. So those are kind of the core, or 3 legs of the stool, as folks like to say, that must be strong in order for your business to be strong. So I always go to work looking at what you sell, how you sell it, and who's delivering it to your client.
So looking at as kind of the 3 legs of a stool, the 3 P's that you mentioned, what is the philosophy you approach towards that to get the best results for your client?
So that ties right back into that big issue I just mentioned, focus. Since there is such a limited bandwidth, I love coming up with simple strategies that people can actually do. You can actually incorporate into their week. If it's a strategy that fits in a book and goes on a shelf, it's probably not going to ever get implemented. So my philosophy is coming up with a series of simple strategies, attacking one area at a time. We don't bite off the whole thing. We take we take baby bites along the way and step through a set of strategies to get to, whatever goal or goals that the business owner wants to hit.
Mm-hmm. Can you share us maybe a story, whether through a client or something that you might have experienced yourself, having owned your business in the past, that you learned, maybe I did bite off a little bit more than I chew, and that's what kind of helped me shape the philosophy I have today for my clients. Like, don't make that mistake.
Question. I've been everything from a solopreneur to having a business with partners and 20 employees. So that's the width of my experience, the breadth of my experience. And, honestly, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a dreamer. That's just what it is. You have big dreams. And sometimes just biting off that dream and the front end can feel like way more than you can swallow. I used to say I still say most businesses take 2 years to get traction. And in those 2 years, at least for me, it's always felt like pushing a house up a hill. That's what it feels like, and then you kind of hit to a plateau and some of that momentum that you've built up starts working for you and it's less effortful. So I would say every business has that uphill climb in the beginning and, just got to wait it out and, persevere.
So kind of talk about the uphill, up mountain climbing and pushing the house up there. What advice would you give to business owners today, especially now we're looking at a new virtual business landscape, because kind of what we're doing right now.
Right. It's a huge new landscape. And I'll be honest with you, long about March, April, it was a scary landscape. We were all like, what the heck? How are we going to survive this? What are we going to do? Long about late summer, for me, that changed. I see the opportunities in it. I am now working with clients across the nation. I never did that before. I was always right here. But my exposure now is so much broader, and the people who come to me for help are from everywhere and so many different walks of life. So I think that my advice to the people who come to me and work with me is to really take advantage of this new climate and this new virtual landscape. Get on every single networking call you can anywhere in the United States, meet people everywhere, follow up with them just like you would if you were, at an event or a, trade show, just like you would, just treat it the same. And it is the new way of doing business. And I see great opportunities in it. So I would say take advantage of the virtual aspect of the new world that we're living in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of business coaches out there. What is it that makes Terri special compared to everyone else that says, oh yeah, I'm a business coach as well?
Right. First, I've walked the talk a bunch of times. I've started and successfully created and maintained a bunch of businesses. That experience, while it is not an MBA, it is real life experiences so that I kind of know what I'm talking about and I have very good solutions to problems. But that's probably not the real reason. The real reason is I'm a combination strategist, but also cheerleader. And I don't just walk away after I tell you what to do. I stay there until we together accomplish. And it goes right back to that first problem of focus. I am there to remind you every week what it is you said you wanted to accomplish. Because in the thick of things, as a business owner, you're quite likely to forget what it is you said you wanted. So I'm your big reminder. But I stay there until we get it done. And it's a very fulfilling thing to do and a very rewarding thing to do, to stand by a business owner and watch them grow and succeed. Yeah.
So we'll kind of talk about your experience and focus. If we could have put you in a time machine and send you back to Terri, let's say 20 years ago, What would you have said to yourself? Like, what would be your biggest advice?
You know what? I'm still living the very same way I lived 20 years ago. I left the South after college. I never left the South. I'm from Alabama. Never left the South. Mm-hmm. And I got a bee in my bonnet to go somewhere, anywhere. So I got in my car and I started driving west. This is true. And I wound up at the foothills of the Colorado mountains. Like, just there they were. I'm like, okay, this is gorgeous. This is where I'm going to stop. So we ended up, long story short, getting a job at a ski resort in Frisco County. Some of you may have been to Copper Mountain. Anywho, that I got a job as a photographer on Copper Mountain, which is all fine and dandy, with one exception. I'd never had on a pair of skis. I'd never been on I'd never skied. When they found that out about me, they told me I couldn't have the job. And I told them that they owed me a week. They had hired me and they owed me a week to make them money. If I could make them money in a week, they had to keep me. So they laughed and they kept me for a week. So that next morning I went up to the ski resort, to the Copper Mountain, and I carried my skis, which somebody had loaned me, over to the lift. It was just being turned on. The lift operator just got there. I didn't know how to get on. So he literally put my skis on me and sat me on the lift. I was tiny at that stage of my life. And so I get up to the top and I remember he said, "It's easy, just lean forward. You'll come right off." Yeah, I rolled right off. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
I got up and I scooted over to the downhill portion, and he said, "Just stay under the slope. That's a green slope. You'll be fine." Somehow that didn't happen, and I wound up on a blue slope. If any of you have ever skied, first time on skis, didn't know how to even put the darn things on. I'm on a blue slope. And what happens when you go to a blue slope, it's flat and then it's not, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to point those skis down. You literally have to point them down. That's a very frightening prospect, especially if you've never been on skis before. So I looked out of that mountain, and I knew I had two options. So in which mountain, in which I would have to go back to Alabama, a failure. My other option was to point them down and risk dying. I literally thought it might be my last day on earth. And so that was my choice. Walk down and go home a failure, point them down and take the risk and, pray to not die. So I pointed them down, and I'm still here, and I've been pointing them down ever since. So for me, launching a business is pointing those skis downhill. It is just taking that leap off the flat portion of the mountain and going straight down. A little bit long-winded there, sorry. But,
that
is the story. That is the story. I think every person who started a business feels the very same way. It's like taking a jump into the abyss. You really don't know where you're going to land. You don't know if you can land on your head or your feet. You just go, so, and fight for all you're worth.
And it's really kind of walking away from that security blanket of a paycheck into, as you mentioned, just uncertainty, absolute uncertainty.
Absolute uncertainty. I laugh when people ask me my claim to fame. What do I think my claim to fame is? So my claim to fame is this. I had my last W-2 when I was 23 years old. Mm-hmm. That's my claim to fame. Thank you for laughing, Scott.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Now, with a story like that, I can't imagine that I could top that with another bigger, more impactful question. But for our listeners, what would be something that you would like to also share with them? Something that, I took this as a grand lesson, and I would like, if there's only one point that I can get across, something they can learn and take away from, what would be that? It's
real simple. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's an adventurous life. It's a great life. I left it all on the table, as I say. I wouldn't take back 1 second, not even of the terror. I wouldn't take it back. It's been an amazing ride. To own your own business, to direct your own life, there's just nothing better. So that's what I would say. If you have a dream, I just say go for it. What's the worst that can happen? Eat beans for a year. It's fine.
Well, then how best can someone get some kind of guidance in pointing their skis downward? How can they best reach out to you and contact you?
Easy. You can just email me. I'm Terri at Smallbiz.Consulting. Yes, .consulting. It's a new domain, and I'm so happy that I got it. So yeah, it's very simple to remember. Terri at Smallbiz.Consulting. And thank you for asking.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
So next guest coming up, we have Scott Ward, who's with Corporate Real Estate Advisors. And since we're on a topic of leaping, we have some unique stories to share. So Scott, kind of give us a story of how you got into the entrepreneurship world.
Hi guys, thanks for having me, Anthony. This is awesome. And I identify with so much with what Terri was just relating to, because my story is I was sitting in my advertising corporate office as a writer producer, looking down into the parking lot one morning, watching the owner come in late in his nice car. And I'm going, God, I can do that. I mean, look at the way the guy dresses. Of course. What's he got that I can't do? And little did I know, he was probably working since 5:30 a.m. in his own home office. And then he comes. Those kind of things go through your head, and then they start rolling, and you say, gosh, here are some assets I have. Here's some things I can do. And I just happened to run across a particular franchise, and that just hit me right. It was a thunderbolt. It embraced a lot of the things that I really, really cared about. And that was a hometown, locally owned business where I had moved around a lot as a kid, like 16 times in 18 years. And I really wanted a hometown. And so that appealed to me. And the name of the franchise was Play It Again Sports. And that appealed to me because it was all about recycling. Sports was good, but quite frankly, I could care less who was in second place in the American League West. I mean, to me, it was community and recycling. And yes, sports was a great vehicle for that. And it all wrapped into that It's a Wonderful Life kind of a business. And it really turned into that. And through that, I became a multi-unit owner. And I mentored 6 employees to go on and own their own business. I was eventually elected to be the chairman of the entire country's Franchise Advisory Council, which is sort of the liaison between the franchisees and the franchisor. It gave me a great big world perspective from a publicly traded company. And from that, I said, okay, now I want to remake my stars again, because I just wasn't finished. And again, that leap of pointing my skis downhill, like Terri was saying, I wasn't quite as scared as I was the first time, but because you kind of get it in your blood and there's this little adrenaline pump and you're like, okay. So corporate real estate advisors, I lean on that advisor word because I'm probably one of the few commercial real estate guys that has ever actually balanced a P&L and a balance sheet and run HR and done all those things again that Terry's talking about, where you feel like a squirrel half the time. Because you're getting yanked from different directions. So when I look as a commercial real estate advisor, I exclusively represent businesses and firms and companies and investors looking to buy or lease property. I never represent a landlord generally, very rarely. I see that as kind of a conflict of interest. But I'm one of the few that commercial real estate advisors that has actually had to do that. So I bring that to the table, and that's my unique perspective on that. But taking the leap, it was really looking down that one day and going, man, if I'm going to grow myself, my family, and my future generations, I have to do that through business ownership or more asset management of some type, of not relying on someone else for a paycheck. That's where that started.
So now that you've kind of gone through this whole adventure and then reinventing yourself into a new field, what would you say would be kind of surprising in terms of, I don't want to say completely easy, but at ease being a small business owner at the time?
Well, I tell you, not knowing what you think you should know, what is it? Not knowing the questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And as a young person, I started my last W-2 was when I was 27 years old, but I started working for a paycheck when I was 13 and started paying some of the bills when I was 15 in my household. And so everything I had ever done, I was good. I was great. And so that's why I just had this ego, like, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to be great. And so you get into it and then you start hitting some speed bumps and you're like, wow, this isn't so great. What do I do? And so the surprising thing to me was humbling, was realizing I needed help. Anybody out there, that's when I would reach out to someone, encourage you to reach out to someone like Terri. I wish I had the wisdom to understand that I needed a group of my own advisors, whether it's formal or informal. I just finished releasing a book about my archetype storyline of my experience. And it's a small, easy to read little book, but those stories, and Terri told that great story about getting to the top or getting my car and driving west, and people will remember that. So my story was, I really wish I had had an informal group of advisors or board of directors, because I did a lot of dumb stuff, but I thought I was doing the right thing at the right time. My story for that, my dad died early from colon cancer at age 47. And on his deathbed, he asked me, what could I have done better in my life? My parents are divorced, and you're sitting there and I'm saying, Dad, we all make the decisions based on the facts we have at the time, with the environment that we have in the time, whether it's family or economic or the information that we have at the time. So you cannot, torture yourself over those things, because the fact is you would make the exact same decisions because you had the exact same facts and abilities at the time. Mm-hmm. So I would have, if I could go back and find, something that knock myself down another peg and reach out for a mentor or group of mentors, that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. So kind of looking a little forward then, what would you think is the most difficult part or experience in your mind as a business owner?
Well, the most difficult time as a business owner, whether small, large, or whether you're the CEO of Delta, is cash flow. Because you can have the most profitable business in the world, or you can be losing money. And if your cash flow is good, everything is happy. But the same exact situation, you can be not so profitable on paper, or you can be very profitable on paper and not have any cash flow, and things just suck. There's a big sucking sound out there. Yes. And it's your cash flow. And so, that's the pain. That is pain, to go out with your credit cards looking for a cash advance to help pay the payroll, because 3 days from now you've got sales taxes due, and 10 days from that the rent is due. And you're looking at your short-term cash flow because perhaps you are a sporting goods store, or perhaps you are some other type of business. Maybe you're an ice cream store, or maybe you're an ice cream manufacturer. And we're going into the cold season, and people don't buy as much ice cream anymore. And so that's what I would say is the biggest, most difficult thing that will hit you in just a matter of time. Delta Airlines was doing everything right. No one can predict the future, but you can definitely predict you will have a cash flow problem sometime.
Mm-hmm. So through your experience, since with your emphasis on cash flow, is that something that you think in terms of lessons, or be able to really keep track, that is the number one thing that you would suggest? Or is there something else on top of that?
Well, there's a lot of things that contribute to that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where, you need to dig a little deeper and pay attention. Have a plan. And of course, plans are meant to be followed, but once you get your plan in place, then you can be aware of opportunities, and you can go off your plan a little bit based on some opportunities. So whether it's a marketing plan, or it's an inventory development, or a human resources development plan, all of those things cost money. All of those things affect cash flow. But have your plan and work the plan. But when you get comfortable with those, my story is the old Pirates of the Caribbean. And so in that movie, in the very, very first Pirates of the Caribbean, they kidnap the young woman, and then they're like, what do we do with her? Well, let's kill her. Let's do this. Oh, no. The pirate code says, she said parlay, the word parlay. So we can't do anything to her. Well, then later in the movie, there's another situation that comes along, and things are going really south for them. And they're saying, oh, but the pirate code. Well, it's really kind of a code. Just forget. It's more of a guideline. So it brings a great laugh, because it's kind of the way we all are, right? We have our rules and regulations, and then a time comes along and it's like, it's kind of more of a guideline. We don't have to necessarily follow the rules, but you have to know what those rules are before you can break them. Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about going on plans and sometimes going off plan, kind of segueing into now what you do for other business owners in being an advisor in the commercial real estate side. What is something that you're able to point out in terms of consideration? Because you've been on the other side, paying the rent, paying employees, something that you highlight a lot that other business owners, when they're looking for other properties, probably aren't taking into account.
So let's bring it into present day, correct? Our COVID-19, that's on the subject of every meeting, every Zoom. Mm-hmm. How were you before? How did you handle it? And where are you going forward? Well, I gave a 2-hour presentation as part of Roswell Inc. and SCORE, which is a business networking mentorship program. And then the title of it was Get the Right People, Ask the Right Questions Before You Sign Your First Lease. And so that was done in February. Well, what happened 30 days later? We had COVID, and all of these people, big, small, huge real estate REITs were going into their leases going, oh my gosh, what does our lease say about force majeure or other options because our cash flow has stopped? Mm-hmm. And so those little paragraphs and those minute little paragraphs that some people go, oh, well, that's boilerplate, suddenly become more than just boilerplate. Now, as a real estate advisor, I cannot negotiate or change your legal terms of your lease, but I can most certainly change and we can negotiate the business terms of your lease. For example, if something happens to your property, if something happens where you are not able to conduct business, is it the landlord's fault? And what are those cures? What are those remedies? Does the landlord, has he given himself, a whole year to remedy those problems for you? Or you go back in and go, no, you've got 60 days because and is it the landlord's fault, or is it the government's fault that the government shut us down? And whose remedy is that? So those are all things that you should be aware of and pay attention to. In every single part of a lease, there's different angles for that. What if the Department of Transportation comes along and you have a drive-through, but they need half of the road over there, and suddenly your drive-through, you can't drive through anymore, and you're a dry cleaner or you're a Scooter's coffee shop, which I just had coffee there. It's a great place. And this morning. So those are things that you need to be aware of that are current day, that are affecting where as someone who is responsible for the cash flow and the paying of the rent, I'm very much aware of, because I went through downturns. The 2008, started my business in a recession. Some downturns were of my own causing. So those are the kind of things that I look out for my clients to look for. And in current COVID-19 times, leases are suddenly under the microscope a lot more than they were before.
You mentioned you're talking a lot about stories. Can you maybe share with us a story that can potentially help people, let's say, expand either their network, or maybe even start helping them with their business and making money today?
Oh, absolutely. So to Terry's point, the dynamics of how we network and how we produce meaningful relationships. And that's how a lot of us do business. No, I know you're a solid person. You do what you say you're going to do. You do it quickly, you respond. And even if you don't know what's going on, you respond and say, we're going to figure this out together. Those are things that we always learned through a lot of face-to-face meetings. We'd see each other in a big environment. We'd see each other face-to-face, back and forth. And whether so we can at least get into spacing situations. So how do you uniquely connect with someone to not only start that initial relationship? How do you turn a cold call into a warm call, a colder relationship into a warmer relationship? Do you just get out there as many different situations as you can? Again, starting with your known relationships and networking and getting referrals by asking for them. We all kind of assume that our friends just know we're a business coach, or they just know that we're a wealth manager. So my story for that real quick is I know a gentleman who's in commercial real estate. He's been a club for 20 years. Everyone at the country club knows him. Everyone knows he's having a good time. Within about 20 minutes, his guest had produced 3 new leads out of the group. Well, the group he had known for 20 years. And he's like, well, he forgot to continue you have to beat your own drum at some point. Now, there are nice, subtle ways to do that. But you need to keep in mind not only yourself, but also your connections needs. So, I know Terri now, she has expertise in so many different areas. My toolbox is I'm going to run into people this afternoon who need Terri, or who I've talked to a week ago. And I'm like, oh, they need Anthony, or perhaps they need the avenue of this great RadioX format. So I'll recommend John to them. Those are little toolbox things you have to keep in. Don't forget what you have in your toolbox. Don't let your toolbox get spider webs on it. You have to get in there and use it, or use it or lose it. And he was losing it, and he didn't even know.
Yeah, certainly. So how best can someone find you and kind of through osmosis get some of your wisdom, being on the other side as a business owner, and now having some advisor helping them not make the same mistake when they're looking out for a place to lease?
Sure. Several ways. Thank you. Thanks so much. So scottbward4@gmail.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, of course, under Scott Ward, Commercial Real Estate Advisors. I have my own website, scottbward.net. And it talks about my newest book release. The book release, the format is about 100 pages, very easy. It's called Scabs, Scars, and Pots of Gold: True Life Stories of a Successful Franchisee. And if you've ever seen or read Chicken Soup for the Soul or Who Moved My Cheese format, I call it Aesop's Fables for Business. Tell stories that end up with nice business lessons wrapped throughout them. And so those are ways to get in touch with me. I'd love to share a coffee and look for help for myself and to help you. That's how we get along in this crazy world.
Yeah, so, well, thank you so much for sharing your insight. And with kind of the theme we have today is not just stories, but I think we can all agree that probably the scariest. I think I can't come up with a more apt story as Terri's of point the ski downward, having never ever. So that are kind of considering maybe they're also similar to Scott, where they're kind of looking outside their corporate window and going, you know what, I could do that, but there's that fear, that doubt. And what would be your advice or words of wisdom to say, you know what, get that doubt out, go for it?
Got mute.
So my words of wisdom is own the fear. Let it spur you on. Fear's good. Fear's like energy. It gets you out of the bed at 4:30 a.m. It keeps you working until you've got the solution. So I don't think fear is a bad thing at all. I say, just embrace it, and just kind of like Scott said, after you do it once, it's like anything. It's like, okay, this feels familiar. This is fear. It didn't kill me the last time. It probably won't kill me this time. So my advice is just, suck it up and go.
Mm-hmm. Scott?
Terri, you mentioned the word terror actually, and earlier, and I wrote that down. I said, terror produces energy.
Yes.
I have a little story, but the title of one of my chapters is The Scariest Thing in the Woods. And it's a story about when I was on the Appalachian Trail and I was in one of those huts, one of the shelters at night by myself. And it was so dark. I was all by myself. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't tell my eyes were open. It was still that dark. And there were mice everywhere. And they started coming in and I could hear them all around me. And I was petrified. And my sleeping bag felt like a straitjacket. And I've said, in business, you get to those points sometimes. It's like every place I go, I just can't figure out. And sometimes it's just to go ahead and embrace the terror. I'm out of here. as long as you're moving in some direction, you can adjust your direction, but you got to get moving.
Yep. The other kind of mantra or whatever that runs through my head, like all the time, like today, like every day, is one surefire way to fail is to stop showing up. Because if you stop showing up, you will fail. So if you at least keep showing up, you got a chance of succeeding. So, don't stop.
Well, and earlier you also said a lot of small business people lose focus. And that's kind of what will happen. They'll get things to a comfortable place, and then they'll sort of stop showing up until suddenly, like, oh my God, I got to show up again because the ship's sinking. It's kind of like, don't lose focus.
So,
frankly, it is a different mindset, different personality that it takes to launch a business versus maintain and run a business. Those are really two kinds of people. And you got to be both. You really have to operate out of both sides of the brain. You got to be able to weather the terror and move forward regardless. But you also have to then develop these habits of maintaining, of listening to other people. It ain't all about you anymore. When you start, it really is all about you. It is all about you and what you can accomplish. It just changes over time, with your business.
Well, you guys have heard it from our two wonderful guests, Terri and Scott. Is one, embracing the terror and keep moving, whether you're on the skis or getting out of a hut infested with mouse up in the Appalachian Mountains, whatever it is, keep moving, and eventually you get to success. Thank you, Terri and Scott. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Sure.
And this show is sponsored and brought to you by yours truly, Anthony Chen with Lighthouse Financial Network. Securities and advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates, Inc., RAA, member FINRA SIPC. RAA is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of RAA. Our main office address is at 575 Broad Hollow Road in Melville, New York, 11747. You can best reach me at 631-465-9090. My extension is 5075, or preferably by email, which is just my full name, Anthony Chen. It's last name spelled CHEN at lfnllc.com. Until next time, thank you for listening in.
Bye.